Hey everybody, Emily Staples here with the Yakish team, and we've got Ryan here with RC Home Inspections, and we're going to talk everything electrical panel today. So I hope you're ready to learn some information. So Ryan, as I am out showing homes, I always look for the panel and open it up, check the ampage, and I typically see two types of panel.
Sure.
Mostly this breaker type, that is mostly what I see, but I am still seeing some homes, typically older homes, that have the fuses.
Sure.
So I'd love for you to kind of talk first, if you can, about the fuse panels and the differences there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good question. So first of all, what I always tell people is fuse panels aren't inherently unsafe by any means. They're an older technology. Obviously, you know, with anything you upgrade over time. But what we're looking for when we're looking at a fuse panel is we're taking out the fuses, making sure that no one's doing anything to make it unsafe. What I mean by that is the reason that they can be unsafe is because it's not as convenient as having a breaker and just be able to flip it back and forth. Fuse, you have to physically go buy a new one, put a new one in there, and it can create an unsafe situation. People will do workarounds like put a penny behind it or put tin foil behind it to make the circuit work, but it's not protecting the wiring.
Sure.
So we look at things like that.
Sure. And that could get into some of the things that we see is insurance companies for the buyer that go to insure the house may have a problem with those fuse panels for some of the reasons you were talking about. So just something to be aware of. So awesome. So breaker panels, talk to us a little bit more about that. What are we looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're looking at is determining the amperage of the system. What I mean by that, what we need to do to determine that is make sure the main disconnect is rated. For instance, this one's 200. So right away, I'm looking to make sure everything's rated for 200. And we look at the main service wires. They have to be the appropriate gauge, which is thickness, to carry that kind of supply. And then we're looking for the actual panel itself being rated for 200. In this scenario, all three are, so it's a 200 amp service. Sure. And then the other things that we're looking for is we're just looking to make sure all the wiring is secure, there's no corrosion, the wires are the appropriate size for the breakers, checking for double taps, which is just two wires connected to a breaker, and the breaker might not be rated for that. It's an easy correction by an electrician. But stuff to make it as safe as possible. The other thing you need to be on the lookout for panels is a type of panel that's called Federal Pacific Stab Lock. It's a panel that's actually unsafe. It's unsafe because there's known history of the breakers not working. So there's no protection for the wiring, and they do recommend full-fledged replacing that electrical panel. But the good news is, if you're walking through a home with a buyer, you're actually going to be able to distinguish that panel very easily because the breakers are marked with red, and it says Federal Pacific on there.
Okay,
so.
Good to know, good to know. You know, another thing I wanted to ask you before you leave is I've been in some older homes that have knob and tube wiring. So typically they're, you know, maybe turn of the century homes, that sort of thing. So we don't see them a lot, but we see them some. And so I just wanted to ask you about that, is that unsafe, and what should the buyers be looking for with the knob and tube?
Great question. Yeah, so typical wiring that we come across in homes, the most common is this non-metallic coated wiring, and then this conduit wiring, and then knob and tube wiring. So knob and tube wiring isn't inherently defective. What I mean by that is the system and how it was designed, it worked exactly how it was supposed to. The problem comes with the age. It's 100-year-old wiring, and what happens is the sheathing starts to deteriorate. You have exposed wires, you know, it's run through insulation that people added over the years, and then people splice into it and do stuff maybe not in an appropriate way. So it's always a good idea to have an electrician evaluate the knob and tube wiring, because they can uncover some things that we potentially can't.
Yeah. I think all of this information is just really great to reiterate why it's so important to have a home inspection. And if you've got some questions, if you've got some knob and tube wiring, if you've got the fuse panel, you've got Ryan here to kind of take a look, and then if we need to get an electrician out even further to get some inspections, we can do that. So this is really helpful. Appreciate your time, Ryan.
You bet.